Welcome to Continuing Conversations, a podcast presented by VCU Continuing and Professional Education. I'm Connor Lobb, and on this show, I'll be interviewing different leaders in the field of continuing education. This week, my guest is Sherry Fox, Esquire, an instructor for the VCU Certificate in Paralegal Studies program and the owner of Fox Family Formation, a boutique law firm that helps individuals and couples successfully navigate the legal process of building a family. We'll be talking about why Sherry became a lawyer, why she chose to focus on family law, and her favorite thing about teaching civil litigation for the VCU Paralegal Studies program. I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, I'm here with Sherry Fox, one of our instructors for the Certificate in Paralegal Studies program. Really excited to have her on the show. Haven't spoken with a lawyer before. This is a new experience for me. I'm really pumped, and I'm just interested to hear about all these interesting things I'm sure we're going to get into. So Sherry, first of all, do you want to just tell us a little bit about kind of yourself professionally and what made you want to become a lawyer?
Sure. Thank you, Connor, for having me on. I'm so glad to be your inaugural lawyer. Let's see a little bit about myself. So I am an assisted reproductive technology and adoption lawyer. What that means is I help individuals and couples to grow their family with the use of assisted reproductive technology or adoptions. So what I do in my practice is if there are families who need some help because they've experienced infertility or have had other troubles, just growing their family, they might use a gestational carrier or a surrogate to assist them. So I help them with the agreements that are associated with that. I help them with donor agreements, whether it's egg, sperm, embryo agreements. I help them with the parentage process, which we can get into that later if you're really interested. But basically, it's just I help them to establish their legal parentage of their children, which can be trickier, particularly for my same-sex couples. And then I help people with adoption. So I help them with domestic adoption, parental placement, agency, step parent, second parent, close relative, and adult adoptions. So that's my practice in a nutshell. Now you asked me why I became a lawyer. I asked myself,
origin story. There it is.
Yeah, origin story. So I asked myself this a lot, actually, but in all seriousness, I wish I had a really profound reason for becoming a lawyer. But really it's that way back in the day when the Cosby Show was a positive thing. And, people I grew up watching it. I thought that Claire Huxtable was everything. In fairness, she shouldn't be tainted. So she was just everything. She was beautiful. She was smart. She had these 5 kids. She didn't look like she had 5 kids because she didn't look haggard or whatever. So I was like, this is dope. I want to be like this. So that was the first thing. And then it was the thing of I was a precocious kid, shockingly, who just really had a lot to say and had a lot of opinions. So all the people in my life were like, you should be a lawyer. So I was like, sweet, sign me up for a 6-figure debt. And then I became a lawyer. But honestly, I went and I found lots of things that I really enjoyed. So it was sort of the intersection for me. Initially, I was very interested in politics, government international politics is what I studied in undergrad. And so the question was either I was going to sort of go the policy route and do a PhD in American political theory, or I was going to go to law school. And I just decided I'd go to law school. So it seemed sort of more practical because it wasn't theoretical PhD stuff.
Yeah.
And so, but really it started with Claire Huxtable.
So really the reason you became a lawyer is because you watched TV as a child.
A lot. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's so funny. I think that's really relatable for probably a lot of Americans and maybe others across the whole planet. It's why do you do what you do? Well, I like this show, right? One of the characters on the show, I was like, I want to be like them, And it's good. It's a good thing it wasn't you were really into watching the Justice League, because then you wouldn't have been able to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
like things may not have turned out very well for me if I try to do some of the things that the Justice League people do. Yeah.
But not to like gas you up too much, but like the fact that your specific area of law and helping people like start a family is like, some could call that heroic,
I'll
and
take that.
helpful. Yeah.
I'll take that. I think I enjoy it a great deal.
Yeah.
Also because I really love to see people's children, but like not in a creepy way. Like I love the baby pictures and it feels good, right? Like it's something to actually feel good about in the law. So I feel very fortunate in that way.
Yeah. Cause I think everyone's like seen a movie where there's like a shady lawyer in the movie and you're like the polar opposite. You're very kind. See, I've met you 20 minutes ago, but you seem very kind. You help
Yeah.
people like start families. You have this nice origin story about watching the Cosby Show and wanting to be like Claire Huxtable. So it's like, I get it. It makes perfect sense. It's everything's
Like,
lining up.
we're not all like snake oil salesmen, right? Like not every lawyer is, and no slights to my ambulance chaser colleagues, but like not every lawyer is chasing behind someone or, I don't know, wanting to do someone in, although I had my share of that, but that's not the only way to do it. And even when you do that stuff, like you don't have to be all like bad when you do it. Like you can still have integrity and do that stuff. So, but yeah, I don't feel like I tell people what I do. And usually they're like, oh, you're a lawyer that like helps people. Awesome. They're like, that's really, I'm like, yeah, it is really cool. I'm really glad to be doing it. Yeah.
You should get a costume. Superhero costume. It'd be sweet. So, okay. So you wanted the 6-figure debt, you watched the Cosby Show, and you didn't want to go into theoretical like politics or whatever. So you said, let me be a real world person and not a think tank person. Let's do this.
Correct. Let's do this. Let's see if I can affect change through, through some like hands-on work. Let's do that.
I love that. It's amazing. So, and your practice in particular, and you could speak on this better than I can because I've just read some things about you. It seems like you've done like you wanted to go into maybe policy and you've worked in like civil litigation, you've like worked in like constitutional law. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things. But you settled on this, and I'm going to get the specific name wrong, but like this general, like this family law where you're helping people start families is sort of like the layman's way of explaining. And there's obviously like a specific name for it, but like
that's
perfect. Great. I'm me.
You're doing great, Connor.
My God. Yes. Excellent. So what made you want to like move away from these, not like I don't want to it's not, I think it'd be incorrect to say like more exciting fields. I don't know why that's the first thing that popped in my head, but you hear someone say like, oh, I did like constitutional law, I did like civil litigation. You're like, whoa, that sounds really like whoa. Like what are you like, are you in the Supreme Court? Like what's going on?
Right. It sounds intense. It sounds like you're doing intense things. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure that, on the flip side, we were talking a little bit before the show about some of the implications nationally about your current practice, so I'm sure your current practice is also intense, like in different ways, but what made you want to focus on your current area of law above all others? Because like your whole practice, like Fox Family Foundation, right?
Formation. Yeah.
Formation.
Fox Family Formation.
Not foundation. Yeah. It wouldn't be foundation, right? That would not be what it would be. What made you want to form this practice and just do this and this is all you do for your law practice, right?
Yes. So to rewind back a little bit, so you're absolutely right. So I was a civil litigator for almost 15 years. So I was your typical hired gun. Like if your beef required court, I was your woman, right? Like I was all day, every day, ready to fight that fight. And that.
I'm sorry, is this defense or prosecution?
So it was defense, but it was not, since it wasn't criminal, since it was all civil side, we didn't have prosecutors, but it was defense side. So just to give context of the constitutional stuff. So I would represent, a large part of my practice was representing constitutional officers, which virtually no one knows what that means unless they practice in that area. So a constitutional officer is a person whose job is just created by the Virginia Constitution. Like that's all that means. So there is an article in the Virginia Constitution that says certain people's jobs are now created. And it talks about people like sheriffs and clerks of court and like treasurers of cities and counties and stuff. Like those people, their jobs get created by the Virginia Constitution. And so what happens in my previous practice was that I represented a lot of law enforcement. So they were really interesting, sexy cases. I'm not going to lie. Like the facts were always very interesting, like, you know, use of force cases, just like really, really interesting cases. So I would try cases that arose under the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, Eighth Amendment, 14th Amendment, and any federal statute. So like things like the Americans with Disabilities Act as a good example of a statute that everyone knows that that law exists, and that's a federal statute. So these cases were wild, right? Like I had jury trials. I mean, I had cases where people, you know, were like tased or, you know, just like, I didn't have any shooting cases. Some of my colleagues had those kinds of cases. I didn't have any of those, but a lot of mine were definitely still use of force cases. Yeah, and they were wild, like they were crazy. Like the stuff that I sometimes said in court, like I was like, is this real? Like I basically had in one of my cases, like the OJ Simpson moment, like, you know, remember like when it was like, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
Yeah.
My case, like I laugh about this, like it was basically like, if the gun don't cock, like it wasn't used, which is much worse of a tagline. But I had a case like that where someone said that my client held a gun up to her when they did, it was a negligent search and seizure. And so like, this is just to tell you that like crazy stuff, like interesting, really, really interesting stuff, and actually really rewarding. Like I worked with fantastic law enforcement officers. I do not regret that at all. I stand by all the clients that I represented. They were good people. Sometimes mistakes were made, absolutely, but they were not situations where my clients were like targeting someone or trying to hurt someone or anything like that. So yes, super interesting cases. And then my other civil stuff was just like, you know, representing a lot of business owners, collecting money, some real estate stuff. I mean, I was just, as one of my colleagues said, that I was fearless, which I don't think I was fearless. I just think I didn't know better. So I was like, sure, you want me to go to court and fight this? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I would think ahead about like how bad it might be. Like, I think I would just be like, you need help? Like, I'm a people pleaser. You need help? Sure, I'll go do that thing.
What's your Enneagram?
And the next thing you know, I'm getting locked into a room, like, because it's a commitment hearing and they're locking us in the room in case the person like wants to bail. And I'm like, this is my life. I'm now locked in a room with someone who tried to offer the police bleach as a drink because she was off her meds. And yeah, and I've signed up to come to this hearing. Like, so that's the kind of stuff.
It's like
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, did that for almost 15 years. I had been doing adoptions.
I'm done.
Yeah, right?
Bye.
I've been doing adoptions that whole time.
Oh.
And then like about 6 years ago, I started this practice of assisted reproductive technology at the firm. So I started that practice group, and it was born completely out of just like interest in this stuff. Cause I was like, this is wild. Like, this is wild what we can do now. I'm like, wait, time out. You are, there's all these procedures like IUI and IVF and all these ways that we're helping people create their families. And I just thought it was like amazing. So yes, I got to a point where I was starting to get burnt out on the litigation. And I was just like, oh my God, like I I can't fight. Like some of these plaintiffs attorneys, like my students know, like I jokingly, not jokingly kind of malign some of the plaintiffs lawyers. But I was just like, we are fighting over what again? Like, what did your client say happened? You know, that's not what happened. Like,
The
no.
plaintiff is the person who's bringing the charge, right?
Yeah, who's bringing the lawsuit basically. And
Nice.
they just, I was like, I'm done with you.
It sounds like a very messy thing to be involved in for 15 years, you know?
It is messy and it's hard because almost always my clients, this was the first time they were getting sued.
Mhm.
And so there was that initial like, it's going to be okay. I know that you're really stressed right now. And I want you to put as much of that on me as possible because I can handle it. I know what's going on here and let me deal with that piece. But it's awful getting sued. Like it's awful getting
Are you
sued.
serious?
Right?
You don't
Like,
want to get sued?
like, no, it's terrible. Like,
It's so surprising.
yeah, like who wants to sign up for that? And then, my clients would be
You
like,
want to say you were basically getting sued for 15 years in practice, right? It was,
that.
you know what I mean?
That's exactly right.
Who would want to sign up for that? Sherry.
Apparently, because once again, what did I tell you about my lack of awareness around
Right.
like
Right.
how rough this might be? Like I was just like, I'll do it,
And then you're just like in it for so long that you're just like doing it, and you kind of like pull your head up one day and you're like, wow, I've been doing this for some time now. Maybe it's time to shift.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of it was I loved the clients. I loved the litigators I worked with at my previous firm. I didn't leave my firm because they were all awful people and this is an awful practice, but I was pretty transparent with my managing partner when I was like, listen, I'm getting burnt out and I'm not there yet, but it'd be really bad if I got there and I still had this caseload and I was still supposed to be like showing up for my clients. And the last thing I want to do is do a poor job. So then I was like, sign me up for this cutting edge area of the law where something is changing all the time. Let's have that kind of stress instead.
Okay.
But it has the added benefit of just being a much more positive practice area and it's not litigation based. So
Right.
there was that.
So it's not because it's more. So just describe to us what you do in your new area. So it sounds like before you were sort of like on the front lines. You were like, I'm locked in rooms with people who are like giving people bleach, and I'm like, wow, this is a lot. I think I'm done with this right now. So now you're doing this like cutting edge. Sounds like intellectually stimulating, and you're learning new things all the time and trying to like navigate this
Yes.
is a new area of law, or is it sort of like a
It's still pretty new. I still, it's still emerging and it's definitely niche. It's definitely,
people suing constitutional officers has probably been around for like a while, so that's not new.
yeah. Yeah. People having beef with like the police has been since like forever.
Since there were police, so like, right?
Right. I mean, so yeah, so that part. But so what I do, let's take the example of either a surrogacy arrangement, gestational carrier arrangement. That's what we talk about. And that's literally a gestational carrier is someone who's agreed to carry a child for someone else, right? So we have gestational surrogacy where there is no genetic relationship between the woman carrying the child and the baby. And then we have traditional surrogacy where there is a genetic relationship. She's used her egg. Right. So either way, though, or even if I'm talking about a donor situation, my job is to either draft the contract that governs the arrangement or negotiate the contract. And that just depends on who I'm representing at the time. So if I'm representing the intended parents, the people who are asking this woman to carry the baby for them, I'm typically drafting the contract on their behalf, right? Because it would make sense that they have a lot of expectations about what goes into this contract. So I would draft for them.
Right.
If I represent the gestational carrier, then I'm really reviewing the draft and negotiating the parts of the contract that matter to her. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing with these contracts is they're like 60 pages long, 60, 70 pages long, because they cover all the things, right? Like they literally cover the clinical pregnancy. So it's like, hey, it would be cool if while you're pregnant, you don't touch cat litter. Like that's in my contract. Like,
yeah, that stuff's crazy.
Because it's great because you can get sick. Like there's an actual illness that, pregnant women can contract and then it would be very bad. So it covers that stuff. It covers like all of that. It's like,
it'd be good if you just didn't touch cat litter.
Don't
get rid of
don't touch the cat litter.
Sorry. Yeah.
And like also maybe don't eat uncooked like meat. Like we don't really want you to do that, or soft cheese.
It's interesting because it's like contractually now you can't do these things. It's like legally you cannot, otherwise you're under threat of whatever the legal term is of getting in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So it says that kind of stuff. And, like sometimes we work with that because my carrier is like, I really love hot dogs. And this thing says I can't have like a lot of nitrates. So what can we do about that? So it can be very minor negotiation in that sense.
Okay.
But then there's also like the reimbursement provisions, because in Virginia, you cannot be compensated for carrying someone's child for them, but you can be reimbursed reasonable medical and ancillary expenses, which is very specific. So
it's very specific.
Yeah, very specific. So I am really parsing the language. I'm going through what matters to my client, no matter which side, my clients fall on. And I'm trying to come up with an agreement that encapsulates all the important things about this arrangement, going through pregnancy, through birth, everything else. And of course, that also comports with our statutory scheme in Virginia for assisted conception. So there's a lot of stuff that goes in it, but I'm usually just negotiating contracts. So I'm like calling people and Zooming with people like this and talking to the lawyer on the other side, and no one's really screaming at me. I'm not showing up at court. So different pace to the practice.
It's kind of like, reminds me of what you said about how you were deciding between your PhD and then going in to be a lawyer, like a real life lawyer. But it's sort of like reminds me of, it's more like PhD-esque. Not that you're not doing like real things, but it's more like you're coming through documents and like figuring things out instead of being like locked in rooms with the bleach people. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
You've been a lawyer for like 20 years? Did you say?
15. Mm-hmm.
Oh, but then 6 years ago of the 15 was when
Correct.
Okay, I understand. Nice.
Yep.
That's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't even know that particular thing you do now existed. And it's also interesting to think about writing a contract in that way. Like, I don't know, it's like not like, I feel like it's probably incorrect to say like you're like controlling what someone can do if they're going to carry your child, but it's also like you can't eat hot dogs. And that's that's like in your contract. And it's like, and again, I'm probably simplifying it because we're like talking about this on a podcast on like a Wednesday morning, but like very interesting. Wow. So obviously you're very experienced with the law. You've done a lot of lawyer activity. So, shifting our gears towards the certificate in paralegal studies that my office offers. So it's all about learning how to be a paralegal. And so for people who don't know, for people who really just came here to hear about you and your wonderful law practice and all the interesting things about your life, what is a paralegal and what do they do?
So a paralegal is essentially an assistant to an attorney, but they are more experienced and have a greater level of education and knowledge than a legal assistant, because there are expectations around them actually applying the law in their pursuit of assisting their lawyer. So a paralegal, they are an assistant. They are there to support, right, the attorney and what they're doing. But the expectation is that they have a much broader and deeper sense of the actual practice of whatever area of law that they are working in. And so they really participate in a much more significant way in all the things that the lawyer is doing. So if you are helping, in my case, I teach civil litigation. If you're helping a litigator, like I used to be, then you're probably helping with the drafting and review of pleadings. You're, helping with the review and drafting of discovery documents. So you're very hands-on, and you are actually like doing a lot of those truly legal type of tasks, and not merely, drafting letters and answering phones. So.
Okay. So you really are getting into the nitty gritty. You're like helping you're helping lawyers actually,
Lawyer.
Lawyer. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're helping lawyers.
Multiple
lawyers.
lawyers.
Like, do the lawyer thing. Yeah.
So you helping them write actual documents, or like, or at least preparing them heavily for the lawyer to like review and finalize and things like that, which
Correct.
is something that a legal assistant wouldn't really be able to do because they don't have like the depth and breadth of the knowledge required. Because so they come in. That's okay. So that's what we've defined paralegal, and you're an instructor for our program, which is like it's a 6-month program. It covers all different sorts of areas of law, and you teach specifically the civil litigation sort of portion of the certificate. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do in there? And because we talked about your background, so we know that you've practiced that, but so when you're teaching that, what do you enjoy about teaching the civil litigation part? Now that you've sort of stepped away from it professionally, like, is it rewarding to go back and sort of like dredge your fond memories of that time and sort of your insights to the students?
Yes, definitely. So with the civil litigation portion of the program, I'm really focused on ensuring that my students get practical knowledge on how to assist the litigator attorney, right? So we are going over all of the things with regards to what the lifespan of a lawsuit is, from its inception all the way to trial and post-trial and collections and all that kind of stuff. So it's really important to me that my students are getting the knowledge, the actual like book knowledge, reviewing the texts and reading statutes and everything, but also just understanding, like, practically speaking, how to approach doing that job, because reading the books and actually doing the job aren't always the same, right? So, but yeah, I love teaching this. I absolutely love teaching this, like hands down. I really enjoy it because I get to like pull up the war stories and share with them like the crazy stuff that happened. And but as a way to teach them the law, right? So like it's kind of fun because I tell them about like my case where we had that negligent search. It all just came out of like searching the wrong double wide by accident. We were following I wasn't, but my client, who is a law enforcement officer, was using a confidential informant, and he is watching the confidential informant, but he has to drive back and forth so as to not be like, identified as police. And so I talked to my students about like how that happened. And then, I tell them what happened, and then I tell them what the law says about what happened. And then we talk about, well, what would you do if you were assisting me in the trial, right? So it all ties together, but it gives them a real world example that's also interesting because it's like, that's crazy. They searched the wrong place. Like, what happened then? What? They busted down the door. Yes, they did bust down the door. Like, that's what you do when you do a search, And so, like, that's the part that I really enjoy. I enjoy using all the things I've learned from practicing in this area to impart to them something that's meaningful that can help them with their career. So that part's really fun.
It's like you're like quite literally the person that the students would be helping in the civil litigation scenarios. It's like they would be a paralegal for you, like imaginarily, while you were like not pursuing the case, but while you're like actively like handling that particular case,
Yeah,
they would be like, so it's sort of like it's just like a little simulation where you're like, okay,
yeah.
this happened. What are you going to do, students?
Exactly. It's like, what might this require? And we actually use a fact pattern in our class. That's a tort fact pattern. But we use that throughout. And that's also a teaching tool that I enjoy using because we can always refer back to that fact pattern. We have like a made up case that we're using in order to do all of our writing assignments in the class. And so in that way, there's this sort of like common thread throughout the whole course. And we use that as a teaching point too. But no, I love being able to tell them all the wild things and use that to say like, this is why this might be a really cool career, right? Like you could be working on cases like this because they happen and they happen pretty frequently. So
The fact pattern is like in a theoretical case that everyone is using for the whole not semester, the whole like pro term of the certificate. Okay, so it's like
correct.
okay, that makes sense. But
Yeah,
but
from
you
my
also have,
class.
and you have the opportunity to also just sprinkle in your real world examples to sort of like add some color to what's going on. That's
Exactly.
okay. That's super cool. So like I think that is sort of the extent of my questions about sort of like what you've done in your career and like how you approach teaching the course. Is there anything that you would want to add that you feel like the people like really need to know about the certificate in paralegal studies program or about the law or about what you do? This is your moment.
Sure. So about the paralegal studies certificate program, I think that people need to know that they should expect, I think, very practical knowledge. And I think that's one thing that makes a program really good because I happen to know some of the other instructors. So for instance, Joanna Suyas and I are friends. We've been part of the Women's Bar together for many years. She teaches torts. And so if anybody's like wondering like, well, what does this course consist of? Like, why is this something that might be meaningful to me? I think what makes it a great course is that one, we're practitioners who've done it before. And then two, you're getting real practical knowledge. You're not just reading a book and then expected to go, find a job at a law firm and you won't actually know how to do the things that the lawyer is going to ask you to do. So I think that that's a really important thing in case anybody's like wondering what that means and what the program consists of. There's that. And just about the law, I think that, I wish people would be more interested in it. like we're interested in the cases that we hear sensationalized. And the thing that I think is unfortunate about that sometimes is that we miss some of the things that are also really important. And I wish, we don't really have in this country like an emphasis on civics anymore. Like people, students don't really learn that and everything. So I kind of take it upon myself to teach my kids that kind of stuff because I think there's very interesting things happening within the last 10 years. We've seen very interesting things happen with case law and precedent coming out of the Supreme Court of Virginia. So if I can just be like a law nerd for a second, there's all these cases that are coming up that are affecting our fundamental rights. And I really hope that people are paying attention because we have had a significant change on the United States Supreme Court because RBG is no longer with us. And so there's been real changes there. And I always get on my soapbox a little bit with my students, like, please like take interest in this, because once precedent is set, under the doctrine of stare decisis, the expectation is that it's going to stay set for a while. But we're seeing cases now that are really targeting existing precedent, Roe v. Wade, Casey versus Planned Parenthood, in the abortion context. And I don't think it matters which side you fall on, right? Like I'm not at all saying that you should only take interest if you think that Roe v. Wade and Casey should stick around, but I just think we should be interested overall. Like I just think we should take more interest in what's happening because it has broader impacts. And if you think, well, I'm not in Texas, before we got on here, we were talking about the Texas law, right. Around abortion, the Texas abortion ban. And people might think, oh, well, I don't live in Texas, well, that's not how the law works. Like, it starts somewhere, and you see that law get upheld, and then the next state next to it thinks, oh, I can do that too, and then the next state next to that, and so it's not one of those things where you can just say, well, that doesn't affect me right now. That's not quite how that works. And so I really want people to take interest in that, because I do think we're seeing some significant changes, and we'll see some significant changes in the law potentially going forward. And so we should pay attention. And then I guess about me, I'm not sure there's a whole lot more I want to say about it.
Actually, I do want to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So you have like a concern that there's maybe like people like asleep at the wheel when it comes to like keeping up with what's going on in America with like important legal precedents that they might not believe will affect their life because it's not happening in their state or adjacent to their state or anything like that, or they don't know anybody who's dealing with like, I know Roe v. Wade, but I'm not sure about the second Planned
Casey versus Planned Parenthood. Well, Roe v. Wade is the one that most people know, and I think that's
Right.
the most important precedent,
Sure.
in that area. Yeah, I do think people aren't taking enough of a look at some of these things, because I think
What would you say that people maybe don't think that it would be like people? I imagine that someone will be like, well, what can I do anyway? I'm not a lawyer. Like, I can like vote, but like I'm just one little person. So like,
right.
what would you say is a remedy that an average person could do? Would it just be educating themselves on what's happening?
I think at the very least, I think that's like the lowest bar, is to try and educate yourself on what's happening. And not, this is hard, okay? Like, not being lazy about understanding what's going on in your world. And by that, I just mean, I have found myself sometimes frustrated around certain media coverage of cases like this. And I understand, I'm reading it from the standpoint of an attorney, right? So I'm reading it and I'm like, that's not how the law works. Right? So I know I'm critical in that way. I get that. Like, you got that wrong. That's wrong. And I'm also just like a stickler about grammar. So I read a lot of things and I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not the correct word.
Like one comma could change a whole, I mean, like not really, but like kind of, right? Like one comma.
No, like really, it could. Like, what do you mean? The Oxford comma is life-changing. I don't know what you're talking about, Connor. Like, yeah.
No, I mean, like I'm being facetious. I shouldn't even be. I'm in grad school for journalism. Like, grammar matters. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, matters. Like, you can't just like do it wrong.
That's right. That's right. Possessives versus plural. It matters. We don't do that enough. Next, check your family members when they send you that holiday newsletter and they don't know how to pluralize their name. Check them for that.
Yeah.
So just saying.
Hey.
Think of me wagging my finger.
You need to like a little image of like Sherry will pop into my mind when I'm like, hey. Listen, I talked to this lawyer one time and it's like, this is serious. Okay.
It's serious business. She does not like the apostrophe S when what you really mean is you're trying to make it plural. She has feelings about that. My students would tell you that too, because we go over that. But anyway. But yeah, I realize that. And I think that there's a certain level of apathy because it does feel like, what am I supposed to do? But I also just, ultimately, I think, and maybe this is just my disposition, like I like to understand what is happening around me. And I like to and it can be stressful to do that. But like with the Texas law, like we were talking about, like I did go read it. And I posted about it on my Instagram, but I did go read it because reading the media coverage, I was like, people I don't think are getting that this is more than just saying, I'm going to hold an abortion provider liable if they perform an abortion outside of the 6-week cutoff. Like, it's more than that. So what you and I talked about was the fact that this law also provides for potential civil liability for someone who aids and abets in another person obtaining an abortion. And that could go pretty far. Like, does that mean that the person that drives you in the car to the appointment has aided and abetted? I don't know. I don't. So the person who helps you pay for it, have they aided and abetted? And this is a lawsuit that could be brought by a private citizen against the person who drove the person who needed the abortion potentially, right? The transportation. And it has definitive damage provision. So you're going to get at least, I think it's $10,000 if you prevail in that lawsuit. Yeah. So like, that seems kind of, this is a legal term, cuckoo to me. Seems a little cuckoo. Like I'm like a little crazy Cocoa Puffs. Like I'm like, wow, this is what we're doing now. This is what we're doing. So I don't want to see us devolve into a place where we don't take enough interest in kind of what's going on in the world and don't take it upon ourselves to try to take what little action we can, even if it's just to inform ourselves. Now, of course, I would love to say to you, write to your legislators and do all that. I mean, you could, but even I have a little apathy around that. I'm not going to lie. So
I feel like writing to your legislator is like, what is like and again, please, if you want to write to your legislator, write to your legislator.
Do it. Yes.
Do that because it's important to be like civically involved and motivated. And I think your apathy thing is really well put. It almost makes me think it's like everybody, like, sure, you being educated like by yourself and like your little house is like good, but it's not like, yeah, it's not gonna like change the world or whatever. But if there's like, if like, a lot of people do it, then there's like a hive mind situation and etc.
Yeah.
We won't talk about the hive mind right now because that's a cuckoo to start talking about at this moment. But and I forgot what I was going to say about that. But yes, I mean, broadly, I totally agree, and I think it's I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening, and there's going to be more things happening and more challenges coming up before the United States Supreme Court. And
so do you almost predict that there's like going to be a wave of current legal precedents being like seriously, I don't want to say like attacked, but like challenged?
I think we can assume safely at this point that there are going to continue to be challenges to the right to an abortion. I don't think there's any attorney that would disagree with me on that. So I feel pretty confident saying that we are seeing we're seeing additional laws be passed. So Texas, there is the Mississippi law. So there continues to be sort of like a chipping away, I think, of that rights, or attempts anyway, to chip away at that. And I don't think that's going away. I think I think we're going to continue to see that, because I think certain states have determined that, they are interested in creating laws that fly directly in the face of existing precedent, that fly directly in the face of Roe, and that they want to overturn Roe. And so I think that's going to keep happening for sure.
And in terms of like, if you're someone who's interested in this kind of work and you want to do more than just educate yourself, it's like, shameless plug, being a paralegal would not be like an awful place to start doing that. You become a paralegal and you get to pick where you work because it's a job, and that's how jobs work. I mean, it's most of the time. Most of the time, yeah. So I mean, because one thing, because I feel like that was a great little like interlude. It's so interesting to hear you talk about that. But I was also wanted to sort of ask, like, what sort of person do you think would make a good paralegal? But it seems like maybe a person who meets the qualifications of what might be, in your view, lacking for people in general. It seems like we're not as civically involved. People don't really like want, I don't know. Everyone's like been to vote, and you go to vote and you're like, well, I'm voting for like the big ticket thing. And there's like two other things. It's like one of them is like a referendum, and then this is like the guys who wants to be treasurer or whatever. And that's kind of like what what you mean by like civically involved. It's like, do you know what's happening? Like in like your neighborhood and like out in the world, because it's like the same thing. I mean, like not like literally the same thing, but it's very closely intertwined, because we all live on the same planet.
Mm-hmm.
The law,
Yeah.
like you said, like laws start one place and then they sort of, they move.
They branch out, and it gives others, they're like, oh, that worked there. I mean, truly, that's what we do, in my field. I told you that we have statutes in Virginia that govern assisted conception. Not every state has that. New York just passed statutes this year that govern assisted conception, but you can be assured that attorneys in other states that don't have those statutes, they're looking at the other states that have them, and they're using that as guidance, right, to try to cultivate their own statutes. So that's why I say, if you see something like a law in another state and you don't like it, and it's gaining traction in that state, don't sit back and think, oh, well, that will never happen here. You don't really know that to be true. And so, and I do think my paralegal should be interested in that. My students, we talk about some of that stuff. And I just think I think a good paralegal is someone who is conscientious, who, is willing to ask the questions. I mean, we talk about this in class. Like, I'm like, we don't walk around like you may think we do, but I don't walk around with like the Virginia Code in my head. Like, like I don't like, I know it's like, it's crazy, but I actually don't do that.
That was when we met this morning, I was like, this looks like someone who walks around with Virginia Code in their head, like it's the periodic table and they're assigned.
I know that's the impression that I give people. I understand that. I want to demystify who I am, Connor. I don't actually walk around with the Code of Virginia in my head, but it's important to know the Code of Virginia is out there. And so like I tell my paralegal students, like, I don't expect you to pull out of your hat like 801-317, when I'm talking about an order of publication, but I do want you to know, oh shoot, Sherry said something about the code. We talked about this. I should probably go see if there's a code section that, is applicable to what I'm working on. So we talk about that. We talk about the big and little things. We talk about making sure you always have a notepad with you when you walk around your office, because some lawyer is gonna stop you, because we're awful about this. They're gonna stop you while you're getting your coffee and say, can you go draft, the discovery in the Smith case? And by the time you get back to your office, you will not remember that was a request made. So you should have a pad with you all the time. But yeah, I think we give them some of the things that are like the practical things, like you might want to do this if you want to be successful. And I think they get that. I think they learn that.
Well, I think that I feel like we could probably continue this for a very long time. But in the interest of just not having a 3-hour long podcast that people might not want to listen to. Not that it wouldn't be interesting, but it's like people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we should cut it off while the going is good right now.
I think that was a really good. So just ultimately, if any of the things we've talked about sort of connect with you in any kind of way, the certificate in paralegal studies is something you should check out. And like Sherry just said, a lot there's the carry a notepad with you. There's the be civically engaged so you can be a good citizen. And then the work sounds fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
I think it is.
And if you want to be fascinated and you want to be involved in your community and in the world, then maybe you should be a paralegal and you should figure out how to do it with VCU continuing and professional education.
Agreed.
So Sherry, thanks a lot this was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on. And
thank you so much.
Hope you have a great day, and everybody out there listening, you have a wonderful day as well. Thanks for listening to that episode. I had such a great time talking with Sherry. Lawyers are just smart and interesting people, and I learned quite a bit about the law. Maybe I should become a paralegal. If you want to learn more about the VCU Certificate in Paralegal Studies program, visit ocpe.vcu.edu/paralegal. And I hope you have a great day.